Hi, Alan Stratton from Woodturning. A couple of months ago I turned a bowl from mesquite, and I bemoaned the fact that mesquite doesn't grow where I live here in Utah and that I really didn't have access to it. Well, Mark spoke up and said, "Hey, I have plenty of mesquite." Well, I had to find out where he was from. It turns out he lives in Arizona in the Phoenix area, and I was going there over Christmas. So we got together and I got a bunch of mesquite logs that I'm still trying to process down. So let's turn this little bowl out of mesquite. Now this one I turned all at once, and the mesquite was dry enough that it did not warp very much at all. So here's a bowl. Let's turn from that mesquite. Thank you, Mark.
Although mesquite is, at least in my experience, a low moisture wood, this wood still contains a lot of moisture. After trimming the ends and the corners on the bandsaw, I'm mounting to my lathe against closed chuck jaws with live center pressure. I'm comfortable with this mount since the top surface is fairly smooth and flat. But since I don't saw blanks to a circle to avoid cutting off too much wood, I do have a lot of vibration even at slow speed. As I tool down to round with my large bowl gouge, I can gradually turn up the speed. Little nibbles approaching from the bottom keep me cutting mostly side grain. Even though this is fresh wood, it does not have much free moisture that would give me a shower. As I get the wood round, I have to start thinking about a tenon. The bowl is not large, so I want to minimize the foot. I measure my smaller jaws to see what I can do. But as I form the tenon, I'm not liking the sapwood for this bowl. I could use the tenon as is, but since I'm not going to let this dry and then return it, I want to minimize the foot. I'm not finalizing the exterior shape right now. I've now reverse mounted the bowl onto that tenon and sapwood. After flattening the top, I'm measuring for a mortise for an expansion mount. I don't care very much how deep to make this mortise since I will be removing it completely later. If I did care, it would be probably 1/8 of an inch or less. Now the bowl is reversed again with an expansion mount in that mortise. I've freshly sharpened my gouge. The first order of business now is to reduce what will become the foot and cut a new tenon. Then go on to shape the bottom profile. This profile is a small base and straight flare. Since the wood is green, it may warp somewhat, but I don't expect a lot of warping. Now the bowl is reversed yet again onto the smaller foot and tenon. I can now hog out some of the bowl before I get started. Then work down about 1.5 inches down to my target thickness of about 1/8 of an inch. Once it is at target, I move to the next section and reduce it similarly and blend between the two cuts. Finally, take out the wood in the center. I'm not quite happy with the center yet, and gouge work is getting more dicey. I've switched to my heavy bowl scraper for the final strokes. Next, I put the bowl in a brown paper bag for a couple of days before sanding. Between the dry nature of mesquite and the couple of days to dry, the surface moisture is gone, and I can sand this bowl. It has not warped very much at all. Maybe that is the arid nature of mesquite. Power sanding works at very slow lathe speed due to the warping. I also need to address the foot. I could use cold jaws on my chuck, but I think I can grind it off in less time than setting up the cold jaws. So I'm using a rasp cutter and my Proxxon right angle tool. This comes off very quickly, then switch to a flap sander head to remove the rasp marks. Then finish off with my standard sander. Now it is time to finish with walnut oil. I have a new jug to use, but as soon as I pour it into the bowl, I know something is wrong. The color is right, but the viscosity is wrong. It turns out that I put used denatured alcohol in an old walnut oil bottle. I had used it to dry a walnut bowl a long time ago. That experiment worked, but the denatured alcohol is expensive. No choice now but to put it all over the bowl to make sure any color left is consistent. Then let it dry again for a couple more days. Now for the real walnut oil. The problem is that the alcohol raised the grain. I could just sand it again, but why not wet sand it with the oil as the sanding media? The foot was the roughest, so I hit it again with 220 grit. Then hand sanded the entire bowl with 400 grit. One plus is that some wood dust will stay in the wood pores and not be wiped off. That reminds me of my teen days when I worked in an auto paint shop. I did so much hand wet sanding that I sanded off my fingerprints. I had to wrap masking tape around my fingers when they got bloody to keep sanding. Those were the days. Now I have a medium-sized mesquite bowl. The mesquite has a very nice color and grain pattern. The mesquite was fresh, but still did not have the water content of fresh wood of other species. It is hard and dulls my tools, but it is worth it. Thank you, Mark, for the wood. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe on my website, tell your friends, and send me your comments and questions. Every week I make a new woodturning video. There are now 8 years worth, over 400 videos to choose from on my website. But please wear your full face shield anytime the lathe is running. Until next week's video, this is Alan Stratton from As Wood Turns.